Well, the U.S. government is set to strip thousands of Myanmar nationals living in America of their temporary immigration status. The Trump administration cites elections planned by the ruling military junta as evidence the situation in the war-torn country is improving and safe enough for citizens to return. Thomas Kean, senior consultant on Myanmar and Bangladesh with the International Crisis Group, says that's far from reality.
Well, I think, this is an administration that has an anti-immigration policy. So I don't think the decision itself was unexpected. But the reasoning, the logic for it is completely divorced from reality. I mean, this argument that the country is safer, that it's become more stable, that there have been improvements. The announcement cited an upcoming election as potentially free and fair. I mean, that's so far from the reality in Myanmar today. And so I think what we're seeing is an effort to sort of contort or twist the truth to reach the outcome that the Department of Homeland Security wants to reach on the temporary protected status of Myanmar people in the US.
Yes, and estimates are that 4,000 people could be impacted by this. But who are some of these Myanmar citizens who've had to flee the country, and why have they had to do so?
So most of them, as far as I'm aware, they were actually in the US already at the time of the coup. And many of them were studying at American universities. And so they were given temporary protected status, which meant that when they could essentially stay in the United States indefinitely because of the situation in Myanmar. And I think that was a decision that was entirely justified given, the civil war in Myanmar, the escalating conflict, and particularly the fact that many of these students, were probably supporters of the opposition movement. And so therefore, returning to the country could put them at risk of retribution from the regime. And so that temporary protected status has been withdrawn, and they will face difficult decisions. I mean, I understand many of them are scrambling to try to organize alternative visas, either through schools or workplaces, or to apply for asylum. But it's not clear that they'll be able to stay in the United States illegally, and so they'll face the choice of either staying illegally or moving to another country or returning to Myanmar.
What sort of retribution might they face from your perspective should they be forced to return to Myanmar?
I think it depends to some extent on whether they've been a high profile activist or not. In that case, it would be quite dangerous for them to return. But I think there's also just a level of unpredictability around safety and security in Myanmar. I mean, I was working for an organization called Frontier, and one of our editors, an American, was arrested really by mistake, and he spent 6 months in prison. So, it's not a safe or secure environment for anyone, really. And I think the other thing is that many of these people would be under, for men, would be under 35 and therefore eligible for conscription. So the military regime in Myanmar has introduced conscription at the start of last year because it was, struggling to find enough recruits to fight the civil war. And so those who return could be forced to join the Myanmar military and fight, for an army that most of them would not support. That would obviously put them at risk.
Yes. And Thomas, what do you make of the Trump administration citing that things are improving in the country simply because the junta is about to hold elections in late December?
Well, this is a sham election. I mean, it's not a real election in any sense. The outcome is a foregone conclusion. The military-backed party will win the election and get to choose the president. The current military chief might become the president. Either way, he will still, control the state apparatus in Myanmar after the election. It's designed to entrench military rule. The opposition parties have been banned from participating and deregistered. And obviously, you've got a civil war going on all around the country. And most of the groups that are fighting the Myanmar military and not participating or even allowing the election to take place in their territory. So the election will only take place in, a relatively small portion of the country geographically. And I think the key point here is this is an election that's being stage managed by a regime that is really illegitimate. The Myanmar people generally do not support the military regime. So, this is not an election that we should be lending any credibility to. And I think one of the problematic things about this announcement is that it does legitimize this election. It does present it as credible by saying that it could be free and fair and is part of a broader pattern of stabilization in the country, which is simply not true.
And separately and finally, we are seeing a big crackdown on scam centers operating in Myanmar. The junta has released videos of arrests and buildings being demolished. Is that a response to the global pressures and outcry over how human trafficking is involved in these operations?
Yeah, it's a response to pressure from both China and the United States. So while this U.S. administration, clearly doesn't see human rights in Myanmar as a priority, it is very much focused on cracking down on cyber scams because U.S. citizens have been victims of cyber scams run out of the Myanmar borderlands by Chinese criminal networks that are leasing territory from armed groups aligned with the Myanmar military regime. So there's a lot of pressure from both China and the United States now to crack down on these cyber scam centers. And that pressure really is forcing the Myanmar military to take action. It's been quite well established that the Myanmar military, individuals within the military, are making money as well from these cyber scam operations, but they've been forced into action. And I think we need to watch to see whether this is a performative crackdown to try and relieve some of the pressure, or whether it is, going to seriously neutralize the cyber scam operations that are in the Thai-Myanmar border area. My suspicion is that regardless of the intent, they will move to other areas run by pro-regime militias and arms groups. But we will have to wait and see how that plays out.
Okay, Thomas Kean, really appreciate your insights on Myanmar as always. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.